If you've ever wanted to take incredible photographs using nothing but your iPhone, an enormous part of that is the settings that you choose to shoot that photo with. That's what we're going to break down in this video. I'm going to showcase some of the best iPhone camera settings that you can use to take your photos from looking something that look a little bit like this to then something that might look a little bit like this. My name is Tom, I'm a professional photographer and videographer. I also do a whole ton of smartphone photography and mobile content creation. Before we get into the settings app, I just want to briefly talk about my iPhone. The iPhone that I'm using is the iPhone 15 Pro. It's been my daily phone since it came out. Because this is a newer Pro model iPhone, some of the things that I'm talking about will just relate to the iPhone 15 Pro and some of the other Pro iterations of phones, but I'm going to be talking about a whole bunch of things, a lot of which will be compatible with older devices if you happen to be using a slightly older iPhone. So without further ado, let's head into the settings application. You're going to scroll down until you find the camera settings. So the first few settings on this page relate to video. We're not going to be covering that in this video. On the iPhone Photography School's YouTube channel, there are some videos covering the best iPhone video settings, so you can check those out if you're interested. But the first one we're going to look at is formats. This page is extremely important because it's where you control actual file formats for the photos that you're taking, and also things like resolution, which of course is massively important when we're talking about things like phone photography because of these small sensor sizes available on these phones. So the first thing that you can see right at the top is camera capture, and I have this set to high efficiency because what this is going to allow us to do later is, for instance, on my iPhone 15 Pro, because you have available that beautiful 48 megapixel sensor, by choosing high efficiency, we're able to shoot in large 48 megapixel photos whilst actually the file size being much more efficient. If we used JPEG, which is the other alternative, those file sizes are going to be super large and will very, very quickly fill up your iPhone. If you're on an older device, you might want to keep this at most compatible instead of higher efficiency, because there is a very, very small quality trade-off between the high efficiency formats and JPEG. JPEG will be slightly better, but like I said, it is massively worth it in terms of a trade-off when we're working with the larger files like the 48 megapixel files out of the iPhone 15 Pro to stop it filling up your phone. Next is the photo capture. I believe this option will only appear on the iPhone 14 Pro and iPhone 15 Pro, but you can just tap into there, and this will allow you to set the kind of default resolution for the camera system. I leave this at 24 megapixels because why wouldn't we want a bit of additional detail in there? But if you are again worried about file space, you can reduce this to 12 megapixels. The next control here is also very important. This is the ProRAW and resolution control. So what this will allow you to do on phones that are able to shoot in Apple ProRAW, which we will talk about later, this allows you to actually shoot and control it within the camera app. So of course we want to turn that on. By default, I go to the high efficiency format mode. I just like to be able to shoot in this mode by default, and then I can always change it to ProRAW if needed. So let's head back now onto the main camera settings app. Next we have preserve settings. So what this will allow us to do is that any of these options that are toggled on within this settings menu will not be reset every single time you quit out of the camera app. So this is obviously really, really useful. Just play around with this settings menu. This is going to be kind of personal preference. You might find something in that menu where you actually kind of really like it to be always persist whenever you open the camera app. Here's a couple of kind of general iPhone options. Record stereo sound, that's a video setting. Use the volume up for burst. If you want to shoot burst photos, you can use the volume up button to do that, turn that there. I don't really shoot burst on my iPhone personally. Here's a couple of composition settings that will massively help you. I would always suggest you turn on the grid. What this is going to do is of course overlay a grid on the camera app itself. This will help you practice basic photo composition using your iPhone camera. This is just a good setting for everyone in my opinion. Level, we have a level indicator. Whether your phone is against the horizon, that's kind of useful to turn on as well. I like to mirror my front camera. Again, that's probably a personal preference one. Scrolling down slightly, we have the photographic styles selection. This again is personal preference. There is nothing wrong with choosing one of these modes. I always tend to stick on standard, but you might, for instance, really like the rich contrast style that the iPhone offers. You can choose these, but this is kind of setting the default. Again, I'm just going to hit standard because that's what I like to stay on. There's a few settings here at the bottom. There's nothing kind of particularly major here. The main camera thing is an iPhone 15 Pro feature. Portraits in photo mode for the newer phones is a really, really useful thing because this is allowing you to capture portrait data even if you haven't shot a portrait mode image. So this is going to, if I wanted to take a photo of myself right now on my phone, because I have this toggled on, the iPhone is still going to retain that portrait mode data and allow me to use that after the fact if I decided to. You should always have this toggled on if you have this option available in your camera settings. Finally, the last three settings, I would thoroughly recommend you enable all of them. They're kind of general quality of life iPhone camera settings. You should have all three of them on. Okay, so here in the iPhone camera app, we're going to briefly walk through all of the most important settings within the app itself whilst you're actually shooting photos. So starting off from the top left up here, first of all, we have our flash. We can turn that on or off. Actually, turning that off will enable night mode. That is the kind of button you're seeing there. So obviously right now it thinks it's very, very dark because it's up against my, my background here. But then if I lift that up, you can see that the night mode actually switches off. Then we have a setting to enable more settings along the bottom here. Again, you have an easier manual flash control in night mode setting. The ability to turn on or off live photos, which are the photos that you can tap and hold down and actually capture some motion within your photos. There's also a control up here for live photos. This is another setting, quick way to customize the picture profiles that we spoke about earlier, so you can actually choose those dependent on the shot. So that's always a really nice feature to have. Here's the aspect ratio. You've got square, so you could shoot square if you wanted to. You can shoot in 9:16 or you can shoot in 4:3, which is the original aspect ratio and the one we're going to stick with. This is a manual exposure control where you can go up or down for the brightness of your image. I'm going to put that back to 0. You can see over here, this is the macro button that appears, and you can see that you are able to get macro shots manually. That is because you have the macro control setting on in the camera app. When you are near a subject, that button will appear and you're able to control this manually. I personally find this a far better option than doing it another way. So to get rid of that bar, we can also just swipe down as well. Of course, we have the other photography modes along the bottom. I would always stay in photo mode unless you're shooting something specific like a portrait or a panorama. And then we have the most important setting of the lot. This is the mode we spoke about earlier. You can see up here in the top right hand corner, it says HEIF Max at the moment. So you can turn that off and it will shoot in a low resolution image file. This is going to be the type of shooting that you'll be just doing walking around town, not really kind of too bothered about the images that you're shooting. You just want to shoot lots of photos on your phone and have them not take up a whole bunch of storage. You can tap this and on the 1x here, it will actually take a 48 full resolution megapixel photo. So that will allow you fantastic amounts of data in your image. And if you want to really shake things up, this is where you get the RAW control. And we will of course talk about this later and edit a RAW shot, but you can switch between 12 megapixel RAW files, or for the 1x mode down here, the RAW Max mode. This is the 48 megapixel RAW mode for the iPhone. Say you're on holiday and you see the absolute view of a lifetime, you're going to want to, if you have the option on your phone, select RAW Max because this is going to be the best possible quality that you're able to shoot on your iPhone. At the bottom here, we of course also have our lens controls. We can go from ultra wide to normal to 2x and 3x. In terms of best quality, the 1x mode is going to always be the best possible quality on your phone. The 2x is a digital crop of the 1x mode, and then the 3x is of course a telephoto if you have access to that. Again, if you are looking for the best possible quality, stick in the 1x, unless the shot that you're after works much better in one of those other modes. I'd like to briefly talk about the difference between shooting JPEG or high efficiency image format and shooting RAW on your iPhone. So if you have an iPhone 12 Pro, 13 Pro, 14 Pro or 15 Pro, you have access to something called Apple ProRAW. And what this allows you to do is this allows you to shoot in a professional image format on your iPhone. This is called a RAW file. This is a much larger, much more data intensive file format, but it actually allows you to edit the style of your photo after taking it to achieve a look that you might not have got straight out of the camera. This is actually a workflow that is very, very common for professional photographers. I'm a professional photographer myself and shoot RAW for all of my photo jobs. When I am trying to take a beautiful iPhone photo photo, because I have access to the Apple ProRAW system on this phone, I will always shoot an Apple ProRAW image, because basically you have the best chance of achieving a photo that is going to look as good as it can be. When I'm just shooting slightly more casually, maybe I'm out in town taking a lot of photos, I will sit in the high efficiency image mode because it's way less file intensive in terms of storage space, and I just simply am not going to edit all of those photos. You can also get fantastic looking images shot in JPEG or high efficiency image formats. It's just that shooting RAW kind of really lets you fine tune that image after you shoot it. So if you do happen to have one of those phones, let's jump into Adobe Lightroom and briefly go through the process of what editing that photo might look like. Okay, so we're here in Adobe Lightroom. This is the program that I use to edit all of the RAW photographs that I take using my phone. So what we're going to do first is pull up this photo. This is far from the best photo in the world. This is from a holiday I went on to Vietnam. Like I said, far from the best photo, but what it will do is do a really good job to illustrate the type of thing you can do with shooting RAW on these phones. So you can just see kind of the amount of data that we get when we're able to shoot RAW. So we're going to first of all do an exposure correction, but of course if you tap before and after, you can see that we're losing a ton of data there in the sky. So what we're going to do is we're going to recover that like that, and the overall scene now is quite a bit brighter. I'm just going to dim this down just a little bit. The shadows I'm going to pull right up. But of course now we are losing some of that sort of contrast in the frame, so I'm going to pull that contrast up and I will bring those highlights down. And you can see again from this image, like look how dark that was before, and we're able to recover a ton of that information. I'm going to warm up this image slightly as well. Again, this is kind of going to be personal preference in terms of the editing style you might actually want to do. I'm going to go across to optics and enable lens corrections there as well. Something I want to do on all of my iPhone shots is I want to pull up the detail tab and pull the sharpening right down to about 10. The iPhone does produce a lot of sharpening, so that's going to help sort that out and just overall reduce that. I'm going to pull up the curve overall to kind of just give a slightly different curve adjustment, and you can just see the difference overall in the images there. A very, very quick edit, and really this is just kind of mainly an exposure correction just to show kind of the amount of recoverable data available in an iPhone RAW shot. So guys, that's it. If you are interested in learning some more iPhone photography tips, check out the iPhone Photography School's course, top link in the description, and learn how you can take your iPhone photos to the next level.